Well, hello, I'm Genevieve Randall, music director with Nebraska Public Media, and it's so exciting to be able to kind of guest host this podcast for Lincoln's Symphony Orchestra. We're always happy to support Lincoln Symphony in all of their efforts, and for this podcast, we get to have a discussion here with Elena Ruehr, the in-residence composer right now with Lincoln Symphony Orchestra. Elena, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you, Genevieve.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to chat here for about 20 minutes or so, just about you. So it's all you and me. And listeners don't know this, but you're seated right in front of your piano. Is that where you compose mostly, right at your piano?
Yeah, I go back and forth between the piano and the computer. So the computer is here in front of me and the piano is behind me, and I just turn around and yeah.
That's excellent. How much feedback do you need or want or enjoy, I guess, orally like that, as opposed to knowing what you want to hear in your head?
Oh, all these things are tools. A piano is a tool, a computer is a tool. Your mind is a kind of a tool in a way. I really am interested in hearing the sound as I work. I do work intellectually, and I mean, I could show you my sketches. I have all these little, complicated things that I do, but um, I also work with metaphor, and I try to find sounds that describe the metaphor. And for me, it's really faster, frankly, to find those sounds at the keyboard. And so that's what I do. I improvise at the keyboard as I'm trying to work something out. And then I sketch out the idea, and then I put it in the computer and I listen to it. And then I go back to the keyboard, and it's back and forth.
I've heard that you have sort of a strict composing schedule.
I do. We are actually interrupting it right now.
Well, thank you. That's
Yeah,
very gracious of you.
I do compose every single day unless I'm traveling from 12 till 6 is my schedule. And sometimes I just don't get much done, and at 4 o'clock I call it a day. But I really do try to, those are my hours. That's my working day.
Elena, it makes me think of those exercises they have writers do where you just have to write something, even if it's, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. And eventually things start to flow. I don't know what the equivalent, though, is of I don't know what to write for a composer.
C major chord. I don't know. You
Yeah.
you you know kind of goof around, and I always tell myself I'm going to go and pretend to compose, because if I say I'm going to compose, there's too much pressure. I just say I'm going to doodle until something comes to me, and then I go. And it usually works pretty well. I mean, every once in a while, I have a little block here and there, but yeah, it works pretty well.
Who are some other composers that you love and why, I guess, from any period of time?
Oh, well, that's a really big question because I love a lot of composers. I mean, I usually get programmed not with other modern composers, but with composers of the classical music tradition, like I am with Lincoln Symphony Orchestra, and I like that. That's a comfort zone for me. I really admire a lot of all the great composers. I teach, Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and all that stuff. But I do have a story about Bartok, which I could tell you.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So the story goes that when I was a little girl, my dad was a mathematician, and he was a math professor. And he would sit at his desk every morning. He was very much like me. He would work from about 6 to 8 every morning, and maybe even later. And he would do math equations, whatever they were, whatever was in his, he was solving puzzles and stuff like that. And I could be, and he would listen to music while he was doing his work. And he had this reel-to-reel tape recorder kit that he got, that he got in the mail, that he built himself, and it came free with all the string quartets of Beethoven and Bartok, as reel-to-reels, and it was the Budapest String Quartet. So I was allowed to go and sit there and listen to the music if I was very quiet, and I would sit there in color and listen to all the Beethoven and Bartok string quartets. Now, I didn't know what I was listening to. So Beethoven and the Bartok got all mixed up because my dad wasn't that neat. He wasn't like fussy about that. And if he liked it, he'd put it in one pile. If he didn't like it, he'd put another. So they were all mixed up. I would hear a movement of this, a movement of that. I kind of thought that it was, the same composer on a good day or on a bad day. You can kind of guess what it might be. And I really liked it. And so one day I'm coloring, and I might have been 5 or 6, 7 years old, and I said, Papa, what is this? And he says, Bella Bartok. And I went, oh, Bella, she's a girl. And I thought,
Yeah.
and I thought Bella Bartok was a girl who had written not only all the Bartok string quartets, but all the Beethoven string quartets. And she was my role model. And all my brothers, my older brothers, were listening to rock and roll and all this stuff. And I thought, oh, that's boy music. Bartok and Beethoven is girl music because Bella is the composer who wrote them. So I had this kind of twisted idea, and it wasn't until I was about 13 years old and I was playing Bartok in my piano lessons. And I said, oh, I love Bartok. She's my favorite composer. And my piano teacher said, no, it's a guy. And I got really mad. I stomped home. I told my parents that my piano teacher didn't know anything. And they were like, no, it's a guy. Yes. So it was like too late by then. But those Beethoven and Bartok string quartets deeply influenced me because they're very, very deep, and they were constantly going for years when I was little.
I absolutely love that story. I mean, you don't know right away with a name. I remember thinking that one of Michael Jackson's songs was sung by a woman until I learned it was Michael Jackson. And yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about because why should it matter?
It doesn't matter, and I mean, well, it mattered to me when I was 13. I was upset, because she was
Right.
a role model, you know what I mean? So it does matter in the sense that we do need role models, but it doesn't
Sure.
matter whose name is on the piece of music when it comes right down to it. It's whatever.
I
Yeah.
often think about Felix Mendelssohn playing his sister Fanny's music, but pretending it was his. It just
Yeah.
warms my heart. I wish for time travel so I could like go back and, talk to him about that and what his thoughts were. Like I would be really curious to know, seeing as how
Yeah,
she's
you never know. I mean, maybe they were in cahoots and he was just trying to give her a better reception.
yeah,
It's you don't know what those things are.
it's interesting to think about. Well, we've talked a little bit here about your process, and just to stick with process for a little bit before I ask you about some specific recordings or pieces, I wondered if you could talk about pieces for you that are strictly from inspiration versus something that's a commission, and kind of how those sustain a composer, or specifically you, in different ways.
Huh, that's an interesting, I mean, that's a question I haven't ever thought about before. And I guess I'd have to say that every once in a while I won't be inspired, but like this piece that I'm writing for Lincoln Symphony Orchestra, I knew I had to write an orchestra piece. I knew it was a commission. I knew it was coming up, and I was looking for inspiration. Do you know what I mean? And I was
Yeah,
like
gotcha.
floating around, and I just spend a lot of time daydreaming and stuff like that. And I was looking for inspiration. So by the time I sat down and wrote it, the inspiration was there. And that's usually how I work. Um, even I had once had a deadline for a piece called Shimmer, which is one of my more popular pieces. If you go on Spotify or whatever, it's probably the most popular one up there. String orchestra piece. And I think I was like 27, 28 years old. And yeah, I was pretty young, if I remember properly. I could be off a couple years. But anyway, I was a young kid. I got this, it was one of my first big commissions for string orchestra. And they gave me 8 weeks from the time of the first, we want you to write this piece until the time it was recorded. So not only did I have to compose the whole piece, but I didn't have, I have a copyist now, but I didn't have a copyist. So I had to copy all the music, copy all the parts, get it all ready. I had to do all that in 8 weeks. I was teaching full time. I was working like crazy. And I had lots and lots of bad ideas. And I got very frustrated. I remember it was January and it's Boston. It's very cold here. And I got very frustrated and I said, I can't stand being in the house anymore. And I went to the shopping mall because it was the only place that you can walk around that's not icy. You know what I mean? Very upscale shopping mall. I'm walking around the shopping mall and they're playing Vivaldi's Spring on the, stereo.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm, oh, Vivaldi, I love Vivaldi. I wish I could write something like that. And I said, well, maybe I could, And then I had this like inspiration, which was that what would happen if Vivaldi showed up in the shopping mall and heard his music played beautifully from nowhere, And I
Yeah.
kind of Vivaldi through this kind of weird time warp. So I wrote this piece called Shimmer, which recalls Vivaldi. I mean, it's not sort of through a time warp. It's not in a shopping mall, but it's the idea of Vivaldi with a kind of modern twist to it. And so that was a very strict commission, but it was really inspired, yeah, I think inspiration is a weird thing. I don't know how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about food, which I think is something that people who aren't composers can relate to. If you do enjoy cooking, sometimes you still feel like you have to cook, even though you enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? And so there
Yeah,
some similar thought that process there or feeling about it. But
yeah, I think that's part of the compose every day for 6 hours, which is that some of that time I might, if I'm just starting a new piece, some of my 6 hours might be daydreaming, and that's actually work. You know what I mean? It's because I
absolutely.
mean, it's directed daydreaming. Um, and so, and yeah, there's a whole psychology of not fighting with yourself when you're working and allowing yourself to be, and it's a really interesting thing.
I don't know if I asked you this before in any, previous chat or on our Friday live show or anything like that, but do you remember the first piece of music that you ever wrote?
Yes.
You're grinning like maybe you don't want to tell me about it.
No, no. I mean, it was just I was a little tiny 3-year-old kid plonking
Really?
around on the piano, begging my mother for piano lessons. And I went ding, dong, 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 ding, ding, dong, 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 something like that. So I don't know. I don't remember it exactly, but it was very simple. It was not Mozart. It was just a little thing. But my mother showed me how to write it down because she just thought that would be fun and I was bored and stuff. So we wrote it down and then I titled it Sunshine.
Oh, that is so sweet. I love that.
But then I just kept doing that. And my mom showed me how to write music down. So I was always writing stuff then, when I was little.
Wow, Mom and Bela Bartok so far.
Yeah.
That we've got some real big influences there. How many albums or recordings of your music are there now?
Oh, 12 or 13, something like
Okay.
that. I'm working on 3 at the moment, 3 new ones. So yeah, they keep coming out. And it's part of my process as a professional is that it's not finished until it's recorded. So I'm when I'm not composing in the mornings, when I'm not composing from 9 to 12, excuse me, I'm applying for grants and setting up recording schedules and managing it. And it's a business, it's like a business. I work 8 hours a day. It's a business. And so I take it seriously in that way.
It's funny that you told this story about being in the mall and imagining Vivaldi from hundreds of years ago and this hearing his music from nowhere, which seems like a sci-fi situation. You wrote a sci-fi opera, Elena, called Cosmic Cowboy. And I always love talking to people about sci-fi. How did you choose to go the sci-fi route with an opera?
Oh, that was a commission from the person who wrote the libretto, Cerise Lim Jacobs. She wrote the libretto. She does these really, really cool high-end productions. And I had seen some of them and I really liked them. And she approached me and said, would you like to write a sci-fi opera? And I was like, yes, sign me up. Um, and so it's this really wacky opera. I think it's going to be hard to get it reproduced because it has so much tech involved.
Mm,
And it's so big, it's orchestra plus children's chorus plus 7 soloists plus regular chorus. And it's got a real robot that has a ballet that's programmed, like a real like arm robot that's programmed to do a ballet with a dancer. And it's got, you know, virtual reality glasses and all kinds of screen stuff. And I mean, it's really over the top. It was really kind of a nightmare to put it all together. I mean, I wasn't involved in the production so much, but I was involved in watching the production go through all this stuff. And it was very, very complicated, but it was fun and we got good reviews and it came out well and, you know, all that stuff. So it was a
I think
kick.
it's fun to think of sci-fi in an opera world, especially after thinking of the Verismo of Puccini or something like that. It's nice to have that
Well,
different modern thing in there. I don't know.
well, you know, you think about opera, it's so unreal honestly. So why not just go all out and be completely nuts, you know?
That's perfect. Well, I wanted to talk with you while we still have some time here about just sort of music in general or some, I don't know, topic heading under. Like,
Sorry, I just lost you. Can you say that again?
yeah, I just wanted to talk about some music in general things. Things like what is it like just being a normal person or a famous person or like telling people that you're a composer? Like you meet someone, and I think I've taken calls at the radio station from people who have met composers that they liked, and they're starstruck. They're just like they can't believe they met this person. And you know, the newspaper boy comes to your house, I'm sure, Elena, and just leaves the newspaper and people come survey you and they don't know.
No, 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 of course not. No,
Yeah,
no.
so what is it like? What is it like from your perspective as a composer to talk about your job to someone?
Well, I mean, you know, it's all very shiny when you're at the concert, right? You get dressed up, there's lots of people there, you go on the stage and all that stuff. And you know, it's actually not my favorite part of the job. I like being in my room composing. I love making recordings because that's really nitty gritty work. It really requires serious, you know, concentration. And I love rehearsals where you're working with the other people. I like the interaction of the people working together. I really love all of that stuff. But the concerts for me are a little stressful. You know, I sit in the audience and I actually watch the audience. And if I see somebody falling asleep, I go, huh, maybe I should have made that a little more exciting. You know, like you know, and I mean, I'm you know, if it's a part that's exciting and they're just falling asleep, I'm not so worried. But if it's a part which I know isn't really quite as exciting as it should be, and I see a couple of people nodding off, I go, oh, you know, I should have done that better. You know what I mean? Um, but I don't feel like a famous person at all. I feel like a girl who works in her studio by herself most of the time with her dog, you know, and I I enjoy the attention when I have the concerts, you know, and I like it, but I'm more an introvert than an extrovert, you know what I mean? I It's fine, you know. I always have
It's
to
a
worry
funny
about wearing,
aspect.
you know, it's very hard to be a composer when you're a woman. You can't just wear a suit. Like you have to figure out what to wear. It can't be, you have to look good on stage, but you're sitting in the audience. You don't want to be over the top. Very stressful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, why can't we just have they need to invent the woman's tux.
Yeah, I'll just start wearing a tux. I don't know. That would be a whole different thing. I don't know. You
Whole other aspect of things. You know,
know,
I was thinking also about when you write music, as you're talking about watching the audience and what their thoughts are, this whole concept of aesthetic and taste in composing. I've read countless times where all the hundreds of Vivaldi works, we keep coming back to Vivaldi, Elena, um, were out of taste for a while. One article even had a graphic of like a safe with someone turning the knob, like they locked up his work for however long until somebody decided it was okay to listen to again. Is I mean, what are your thoughts about that taste and aesthetic in classical music and the music that you write?
well, I think about it a lot. And I grew up at a time when we were just at the tail end of a 12-tone music and very, very complex, difficult music. I mean, really difficult music. You think of some of that music that you hear, the Berg and the Schoenberg, which I actually really love those composers and I've taken a lot from them. But it's very difficult, very complex surface. Even Milton Babbitt, who is my teacher, very complex music, and Boulez, Stockhausen, all that stuff. Very hard to listen to. And I was taught that stuff and I have some understanding of it and everything, but I kind of rejected it because I was actually really interested in speaking to the audience in a different kind of way. Um, I like the idea of narrative. To me, that's really telling stories, um, having melodies that are long, that take you through the piece, things like that. They're really important to me, and a more fluid approach to what the music sounds like. So sometimes it can sound really complex and 12 tony and Staccato-y, but sometimes it sounds very simple and straight. And I'll use triads and I'll use sort of standard sort of harmony. And I think of them all as different colors on a palette that I can use to create what I'm trying to say. And that the end goal is not this is maybe why I like to improvise rather than work completely here. It's not that I have some sort of intellectual thing that I'm giving somebody that is satisfying in that way. And that can be satisfying. I'm not saying that it's not, but that my end goal is to have some kind of emotional response to what I'm doing that feels satisfying. So
Mm.
that's, and I've learned from and I'm very solidly, believe that about myself. I've learned that sometimes it's in style and sometimes it's not. When I first started, it was less in style and I had a little trouble getting recognized or bad reviews and stuff like that. Now I'm doing fine. I'm not too worried about it. But one of the things I've learned from teaching at MIT for 30 plus years is that when I ask my students who are super physicists and engineers and mathematicians, I say, what is it that you like about music? And they said, it expresses emotion.
Wow.
That's what they want. They don't want to have a formula, that they can figure out. They want to have an emotional experience. So I feel like they give me courage. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about who determines the style, who determines what the current aesthetic is, and how long pieces will last. I mean, what's fascinating these days, as I think we start to see more music recorded and unearthed by Florence Price or other composers. I can't think of her name right now. I wish I had it on a sticky note on my computer here, but there was a French composer whose music sounds an awful lot like Debussy, but different. And she was writing it around the same time. Never heard of her until now. She was apparently marginalized until people start digging through some more and playing this music. So I just wonder, like, what from today is going to be the Barber Adagio or the.
Yeah, you don't know, and you don't know. I mean, I don't think things have changed so much because of recording, and since the 20th century and the invention of radio, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to disseminate music in this way that's not live performance, it's changed it a great deal. And I mean, there are good things about that because music is more available. There's also, and I love pop music, but there is the commercialization of music. And so, what is good is what's going to make money, which is not always the same thing. Um, so what makes money becomes what's good in the pop music world. It's not so true in classical music, which I kind of like a lot. Um, I think that, styles come and go. I don't worry about it too much. I I don't really think of myself as, oh, I'm writing this piece and it's going to last until the year 20, 500 or whatever like that. And people are going to think of it in this great way or anything like that. I don't think of it that way. I think of
Mm.
it as I'm trying to tell a story now here to these people. I'm not comparing myself to Mozart and Beethoven who are telling their stories at their time. A lot of composers are blocked because they're scared because there's so much great music that they feel like they can't um, top that, and that's not really the point. Who's going to top Barber's Adagio for strings? I mean, you just can't. It's a beautiful thing by itself, but it's a thing, and it's not the only thing.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. I mean, it's like um, I once sat in an audience where the man next to me, I was a student in music school at the time, and I had taken his wife's ticket. She couldn't go. And when he found out I was studying music, he said, "Well, you must be enjoying this concert more than me." And I thought, how do you even measure that? Like it's different for each person, you know? So it's each individual experience. And so I really hear and love what you were saying earlier too about emotion being a key element. And you've mentioned storytelling more than once as kind of a purpose. I don't know. It seems like a big, broad question to ask what the purpose of music is, but for each individual person listening to us have this chat, I'm sure music serves a different purpose for them. I guess we could wrap up by me asking you, what purpose does music serve in your life for you?
Oh, well, I think it has multiple purposes, right? Because you can have, like, you go to a fancy hotel that's very chic, and you get this sort of, do 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 do, boop, 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 kind of rhythm. And I mean, I don't even know if it's generated by AI. I don't know where that music comes from, right? And it's very repetitive, it's very simple, but it creates a sense of atmosphere. So music can do all kinds of things. Music can be spiritual, and it really deeply is related to spiritualism in many, and if not all cultures. Um, Music can tell stories. Music can make you feel a certain way. For me, the most important thing that music does for me personally is directly communicate one emotion from one person to another and to create a communal experience of that emotion in a live concert. That's supreme.
Elena Ruehr, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you about music and your music, thinking about music in general. It's just so great. Thank you so much for taking part of your composing time to talk with me.
You're welcome. Thanks, Genevieve.